Okay, so here's the East Timor. That's a nice East Timor, you might say. Wow. So this one time there's this country and it was called Portugal, and it was like, hey, what's up? My name's Portugal. I'm gonna go have some colonies. So then, so they were scouting around and they found this island and it was called Timor because they felt like it. And so they were like, hey, what's up, Timor? We're gonna colonize you. And Timor was like, what? Okay, I don't know, whatever. And so then, you know, they were like, so they set up some missions because Portugal was like, we love the Catholics because the Pope, he's a pimp, and, you know, that's good. And the Timorese were just like, whatevs, the Pope's pretty cool, I like him, he has funny hats. And so then Timor was Portuguese, and they were chilling there, and they were like, hey, what's up? And then Portugal was like, hey, guess what, time to fail. And then Portuguese Timor was like, I guess I'll just, you know, have independence now. Which sounds like a great idea, until those nasty, evil Indonesians came along, and they were like, hey, you suck, I hate you, you, squish, squish, squish. And so what they did, they were like, hey, we're gonna take over now, and Timor was kind of bummed about that, because, you know, they just had, like, their own little righty cooey thing, and they were like, Fretilin, yay, Fretilin. But then Indonesia took over, and they genocided some people, because genocide's cool. So, like, everyone was like, hey, we're Indonesian now. And the rest of the world was like, we don't care about East Timor because you're just a random portion of an island. You don't matter. I mean, there was some genociding and some killing and massacres, but, you know, people didn't really care outside Portugal because Portugal was like, hey, they speak Portuguese, woo, we're special. Until some more massacres happened. People were like, finally like, hey, Indonesia, you should probably knock that off. And Indonesia's just like, what the crap, we're gonna genocide you all. So then finally the UN's like, oh, fine. We're gonna ask the East Timorese what they want, because they're cool and Indonesia's lame. And so they were like, have a referendum, and East Timor's like, I love a referendum! Woo! And then the ballots all were like, yes, we want independence. And of course Indonesia's like, no! You can't have independence because then we'll kill you, smash you, smash, 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 earthquake, why is there an earthquake? And then the UN's like, what the crap, guys? You should probably stop that. And so the UN landed in East Timor, and they're like, you better cut that off, and Indonesia finally did because they were being lame or something. And so finally, after 3 years where East Timor was just like, what's up? We're United Nations controlled. They finally were like, oh look, it's time for independence! And that happened on May the 20th of 2002. Shortly thereafter, an article appeared in Time for Kids magazine, which, it was just in the corner of, like, the back page of one of them, and it was just like this big. And it was like, look, East Timor got their independence, and it had some dude waving the East Timorese flag. And so I'm like, that's the coolest thing ever in the world! And so I decided I loved East Timor from there on. And that delightful flag at the beginning of the episode, you see, here's the East Timorese flag I made in 8th grade, out of felt. This is my poor artistic talents. This is attempting to be a star. So, did that, because East Timor's awesome. Meanwhile, so on May 20th, 2002, East Timor was like, we're getting independence, and so everyone was so happy in East Timor, because they were finally getting their independence, and they looked out and they were like, let's listen to the national anthem, and so they did. No. Yeah, we're not dumb. I mean, no. Bad. There, finally. There we go. So anyway, they listen to the national anthem, and then they're like, okay, let's settle down. Let's have some election imitations, because election imitations are good things to have. That was actually before independence, apparently. Thanks, wife. So, like, what happened was Shanana Gushmao, because Shanana Gushmao is awesome, and he was like, I'm going to be the president now. Because he was this guy who led Fretilin, which was the big commie independence movement. So basically anyone who wanted independence joined it, including like priests and crap. And so Shanna Gushmao was the leader of Fretilin during a lot of the independence movement, and everyone loved him and because he has such an awesome name. So, Mr. Gushmao. Oh. That's a nasalized vowel, by the way. Diphthong, technically. Anywho, so Shanna Gushmao, he was president, and everyone was happy. And so they were partying, and they were like, yo, shanana, and everyone's like, well, what do we do now? They decided, hey, we're bored. And so part of the army's like, we're really bored, so we're going to revolt. And this was 2006. And everyone's like, holy crap, fires and missiles! Because, you know, we can't have revolts, because East Timor before then was like this happy little country. And then it wasn't. But yeah, so the army was like revolting, and there were riots and whatnot. But then Shanana was like, "Hey, knock that off," and everyone did because it was Shanana, and everyone likes Shanana Gushmao. So they knocked that off. And meanwhile, Shanana was like, "Hey, Prime Minister dude, the one who wields the actual power. I'm just a pretty figurehead. Well, you should probably not have made it that happened." And everyone's like, "Oh." And so then he sacked the prime minister, and he brought in this José Ramos Horta dude. And José won a Nobel Peace Prize, and he was awesome, and everyone's like, cool, good for you. They had some more election imitations in 2007, and they're like, hey, so Shanana was like, I don't like you anymore, Fretilin, because you're stupid in the head. So he ran under his own party, which he made, basically. And everyone's like, oh, that's cool. So, of course, his party, it didn't quite get the most votes, but there were a whole ton of other parties besides Fretilin for the first time. I mean, his first election, Shanana was Fretilin, and he won with like 90% of the vote, and there wasn't any vote rigging, I promise. In 2007, the opposition to Fretilin got a lot of seats, and they formed a government, because in countries with prime ministers, they're awesome. And the president was José Ramos Horta, because he's awesome as well. So after a while, people were like, what do we do now? So they started being like, hey, let's make it a Truth and Justice Committee, like in South Africa. So they did that, and it was cool, except for the fact that they pardoned everyone, every single person. I don't know, I'm holding up the number 1. This is one person. They pardoned that one, they pardoned this one, and this one, and this one. And they pardoned them all, because José Ramos Horta is apparently a Christian who actually practices what he believes, which is kind of a novel concept, I know. But it happens, I promise. So, José Ramos Horta was like, pardon everyone. And everyone's like, wait, they actually did war crimes. Remember the genociding stuff back then? And José Ramos Horta's like, who cares? No punishment. And meanwhile, everyone's like, this is kind of sucky, because we don't really have any sort of money and stuff, so we are sad. And so everyone at the moment is kind of bummed because they don't really have any money and they need more funding and stuff. But they still have Shanana Gushmao, who is their prime minister, and yay, Shanana! I can't make a G with my hands, Gushmao. Oh! And yeah, that's what's happening in East Timor, and that's the history of East Timor for you. So, tune in next time for another history lesson, because history's cool.
Is she really going out with him? Well, there she is. Let's ask her. Betty, is that Jimmy's ring you're wearing? Mm-hmm. Gee, it must be great riding with him. Is he picking you up after school today?